Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. I'm Kristen Smedley, and I'm here with my buddy, Mary Fran Bontempo. And I can't stop smiling because we have, little does he know, he's going to be our new best friend, is Dr. Lee Warren.
Whether he likes it or not.
and Lee, as he said that we can call him now. Is this our first doctor on the show? Now that I'm thinking about it.
We had Dr. Fagenbaum too.
Dr. Fagenbaum too. That's right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we've got multiple doctors. We always say we are doctors of nothing, me and Mary. We're very good at talking with and about doctors. So the funny thing is, people always say that I learned to harness the power of social media years ago when I launched a nonprofit and had to be frugal with my fundraising dollars, right? So I learned about social media, and then I see you on Twitter. And I saw your post because Tiffany and Scotty Smiley, mutual friends of ours, had posted that they were on your podcast. And then I have a very good talent for stalking and nagging and finding people. And then I said, hey, you want to come on our show that we just started? And I was like, blah, 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 blah. And Dr. Lee Warren said yes. So thank you so much for joining us today on this show. It's
great
really
to be
cool.
with y'all. Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks.
So
Go ahead.
We usually do our as we were talking beforehand, we usually try to set these things up in the framework of a reset where you kind of deal with your train wreck or your sucker punch, and then the rise and how you kind of move out of it, and the reveal of your brilliance where you take your skill set and you create or do or move into areas that you may not have even expected. However, on Sundays, which is what we're doing today, our Sunday show, we talk about the faith component because that was a huge tool for both Kristen and I in dealing with our challenges. And Kristen, as you may know, is raising two blind kids. My son dealt with heroin and alcohol addictions for many, many years. And without faith, I think neither of us would have landed on the other side, or we would have landed on the other side, but we'd just be big puddles of goo. Yeah. So I think, from what I've read about you, first of all, you're a fascinating combination of those two worlds because you're a brain surgeon. Yeah. So if there's anybody that can tell us that, no, it's not God and there's all these neuro thingies and blah, 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 it would be you. However, you have that other part of you that enters into the equation. So I can't wait to hear what your take is on all of that.
Well, that's a big can of worms, isn't it?
It's a huge question, isn't it? So we're just going to sit back and let you unpack that. Just go for it.
Okay, so we'll start with a simple topic like the intersection between science and faith.
Right, there you go.
A simple topic. Yeah, 17 hours later while we're still chatting.
Yeah, just a 5-hour show, right? So I grew up as a Christian in a small town in Oklahoma with really wonderful parents who I have these memories of my parents are both really early risers, which they passed on to all of us. And I would get up in the morning and walk down the hall, and I would pass my mom and dad's bedroom on my right, and my mom would every day be sitting on her bed reading her Bible with a cup of coffee at 5 a.m. And then I would get down to the end of the hall, and my dad had a little study down there, and he would be reading his Bible with a cup of coffee at 5 a.m. And as I grew up and went through adolescence and all of that, my parents' one consistent thing was that you always can find the answers to the questions that life will throw at you in the Word of God. And so it was always there that Scripture is the place to go when you're questioning things. So as I grew up, I became fascinated by science and kind of got this notion that I was going to become a doctor from a really young age with no medical people in my family, and went to high school and went to college and got a degree in biochemistry and went to medical school. And somehow it never was a question for me of, is there a God or not? And as I got into further and further into science education, I became pretty aware that pretty obviously that most people in that world either don't talk about it or they don't believe that there's anything other than science and accident. And so there's a lot of Christians who are physicians and scientists, but in the world of science, you don't talk about it. Like it's this chasm, right? Mm-hmm. But what I saw with my eyes was that every time as I got into neurosurgery and began to learn about the nervous system, and we do get to do cool things with microscopes and looking deeper and deeper into the nervous system with MRI scans and all of this. And at every level that we can look deeper, every time they invent a newer technology and we can see farther in, we see further levels of organization and design and perfection, and it just gets better and better the deeper you get. You see, you never get to this place where it's like, oh, now I understand how that could have happened accidentally because it's X. It's not that. It's every time you look deeper, more questions come up of how did this amazing system put itself together if it wasn't designed that way, right? So I had this just persistent blessing of an ability to see it as a designed thing. And for me, that gave me a lot of comfort, is that maybe science didn't have all the answers. Maybe Christians weren't just these noobs who, believed in the ridiculous things, but maybe they actually could tie together. And what I realized a long time ago, Mary, is that whether you are an atheist or an agnostic or a Christian or a Jew or whatever, you have to have faith in something, and you do have a religion, whether you say it that way or not. Like you're putting your eternal destiny on something that you believe in, and it's got to be right. If you've got to believe in something and put trust in it, and that's faith. And so for me, growing up and then getting all that education, I had a faith in God, and I had a faith in knowledge that you could learn stuff and believe stuff and know things. And so my story really starts there, which I don't know if you've read my new book or not, but the new book is called I've Seen the End of You, and the subtitle is Faith, Doubt, and the Things We Think We Know. And where that came from was as I became a practicing neurosurgeon, and I was in the military, and I went to war, and I took care of Scotty Smiley, and that's how our paths all crossed here, is because of the Smileys. But after the war, my wife and I moved to Alabama, and we were in private practice. And there's a brain tumor that people get called glioblastoma multiforme. It's easier to say GBM. But so GBM is the most malignant cancer humans can get. And it's the most uniformly fatal cancer that humans can get. And so everybody that gets it has about 12 to 15 months to live. And almost nobody survives 5 years, and really nobody lives 10 years. So if you get this diagnosis, you're going to die from it, except in extremely rare cases. So I would see this scan of a patient before I met the patient. And in my mind, I would see all these things that I knew. I know when we're going to go to surgery, and I know what the conversation we're going to have. I know what the pathologist is going to say. I know when your hair is going to fall out. I know when you're going to get tired of fighting it. I know when you're going to die. Like I said, I just knew all that. I could see it. So I had this Bible full of things that I'm supposed to believe. God can heal, pray without ceasing, the effective fervent prayer of a righteous person accomplishes much. And then, so I had stuff that I believed, and then I had stuff that I knew, and I couldn't put them together.
How do you, I can't even imagine, how do you, and I guess that's probably why in your world, you have people who won't even talk about or touch the faith side of it, because it seems so far apart from the data-driven model because you know from experience.
Yep. Yeah. So, it was hard for me to sit down. So from neuroscience, we know that people that keep their hope up, people that keep their spirits up, they have better lives no matter what they're encountering. If you can separate emotion from circumstance, your quality of life is higher, even if you die, right? You take fewer medicines, you spend less time in the hospital, you have a better outlook, your marriage survives more consistently. So it was important for me to recognize that I needed to doctor these people, even if I couldn't save them. I needed to help them hold on to hope and believe and have faith, because that was better for them, even if they weren't going to survive their illness. And so I started studying, how can I help people when I can't fix them, which is hard for a surgeon, right? So while I was in the process of writing a book about what I thought I had learned and how to help people, our son Mitch died when he was 19. And so I went from observing other people's troubles to being in this pit of despair of our own. And so what I learned is that I didn't know very much about how to minister to people when they were hurting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's, unfortunately, it's one of those lessons that in life that you can think you know all about it, but
Right.
until you're in the middle of it, I always I always say I was the best mother in the world before I had kids. And then I had them, and then all hell broke loose, and that was the end of that, because you come at things with these preconceived notions, and it comes from, watching other people, it comes from reading, it comes from filling our brains with all that knowledge that, other people have amassed. But until you're in that moment, you can't know it
That's right.
because you haven't experienced it. And one of the things that really just struck me about what you were saying was, if you can't save someone, that doesn't mean that the power of faith and God isn't working. It just means it's working in a way that maybe we feel is not the way we want it to end up, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. And I think that's a really different spin on that whole idea. We just go to the end of, well, if there was a God, then he would save me. Well,
That's right.
maybe not. Maybe that's not it. Maybe there's something
right.
else that has to come out of it.
That's right. And so as I said, as a scientist, I tend to study things, right, and tend to think about things and try to figure them out. And I noticed there are sort of four patterns that I've seen that people encounter hard things, people who encounter things display. And one of those patterns is, you could call them crashers, right? They're people whose lives have been pretty easy and they think they've got things kind of squared away, and then something bad happens and they just wipes them out. And you see people that, even if they survive, or even if their kid pulls through or whatever, they're just wrecked, right? What they thought they believed, God wasn't there for them, or whatever happened, and they never get it back. And so their quality of life plunges, their faith plunges, and they end up in this kind of hopeless place, even if they make it. So there's this separation of outcome from emotion, right? Then there's people that I would call climbers, or they start from a place of nothing. They've had a hard life. One of the guys I wrote about in the book that I called Joey, that's not his real name, but he was this down and out guy, drug abuser, had a hard life. His parents he was a mess, and he gets a brain tumor and discovers faith during the process of dying. So he like goes from a place that's really bad to ending up being really hopeful, and had the best year of his life while he was dying from his brain cancer. Falls in love, and just really is this beautiful story of what can happen if you hold on to hope. And then the third group are these people that are, hopefully most of us, where we hit something hard and we dip for a while, and something causes us to recover. And so even if we die from our illness, we end up in a good place. And I think that, and then the fourth group, of course, are people that have a solid faith and it never wavers. And those are people I can't relate to.
Yeah, right now. No, us either. We're right there with you on that one.
But I'll tell you what turns it around is that the thing that turns it around, if you're able to recover, is deciding to hold on to hope in the face of doubt. So the thing I didn't appreciate is I thought there was belief and knowledge, and I didn't appreciate doubt as a tool, because I think Christians grow up and we have this inherent belief that doubt is a bad thing, that doubt is akin to not having faith. But the truth is, the Bible, it doesn't take you very long in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, to see that a lot of people had lots of doubts and talked to God about it, and God was okay with that. Lamentations and Jeremiah, and most of the Psalms are people saying, God, why are you doing this? And then God shows them, and oh, thanks, it's okay. So it's okay to doubt. But what happens is, and whether you believe it's spiritual warfare, or you believe there's really a devil, or all those things that I believe, or if you just think it's neurochemistry, either way you want to look at it, when you have doubt is a precipice that if you move one direction, you fall off into fear and despair. And if you move the other direction, you fall into hope and faith. And so what happens is, doubt will tell you that you don't know. I don't know if I can make it through this. I don't know if God still loves me. I don't know if God's real. I don't know if I'll survive this. And fear will tell you, no, you're not going to make it, Mary. You're not going to survive this. Your kid's never going to be okay. Kristen, this is not going to, God has abandoned you. That's fear. So fear says no. Faith says yes, right? So faith says, hey, I got you. I'm going to take care of you. There's still hope. Don't give up. Press on. So doubt is the place where you can start asking questions and deciding whether you're going to move towards the light or move towards the darkness.
Wow. So Mary Fran and I are like a subcategory of one of your categories, because we had doubt and we had irate, screaming tantrums in our doubt phase.
What are you doing? That was
all of us
basically.
That's how we kind of came together in this. And we found out our similar stories of the crash and then the, who do you think you are? I'm out of here. And then coming back saying, who do you think you are? I'm out of here again. And then, okay, fine, you do it. That's what we kind of both said.
Yeah, you're gonna. But you know what I think this comes down to too, and I'm hearing this in everything that you're saying, and we talk about this a lot, Kristen and I. I think people have an outcome in their mind, and you know, if you read the scripture, it's you know the verse, my ways are not your ways.
That's right.
So that to me is a place where so much of what you're saying comes back to that idea of faith and hope, even with the knowledge that this life that you're in is not going to last. That's a big concept for us to get around, but then it goes, that's when it falls into the faith category. Look, your ways are not my ways.
That's right.
Yeah, I'll see your verse there and one up you. What I had to learn literally for 20 years is we walk by faith, not by sight, because I had the plans. I was the Catholic school, like only girl in the family of 1 million boys, that all of the expectation was I had the plan, I had everything, I checked all the boxes, and then whammo, twice, 2 blind kids. And I couldn't see how that could possibly be a good thing until the day that I did. I mean, I saw that my son at 3 years old was the happiest kid you could ever meet in your life, and it wasn't bothering him. It was my outcome, my dreams for him. And I've said now it did take me all these years later, but when I say walk by faith, not by sight, I couldn't see what they were going to be able to do. I had no idea. I just had to have faith that it was going to go well and that they were going to live their dreams. And you know what, Lee? I try to tell all parents now that that's how you should parent. That should be your number one thing. Get your dreams off of them and let them have their own. And just be the guide on the side that gets them the tools they need. That was the biggest thing I learned from blindness. And Mary Fran and I are always very cautious to say we don't consider the sucker punches blessings at all. It's the exploring doubt and moving from fear to faith that is the blessing in it.
Right.
Can we nerd out for a second about science? So something you said a while ago is it took you a long time to see how that promise of Romans 8:28, where God says, I will work all things out for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. That is an impossible promise to believe when you find out, I'm sure, that your child is blind or addicted or has died. But what happens is, so in quantum physics, there's this reality where an electron can be in 2 places at the same time. And it might be because they move at the speed of light or something, but it sounds impossible to us in this big world. But down in the really small subatomic world, weird things like that can happen. An electron can be in 2 places at once. And I think God is a quantum God, because it is possible with enough time to pass for Romans 8:28 to be true, that good has come out of me losing my son, even though it is not good that I lost my son.
Yeah.
And so a good example of that is I started writing and podcasting and blogging and all of that about 6 months after I lost Mitch, because we had 4 other kids and I felt like I needed to minister to them. So I started emailing my kids every day and trying to encourage them. And even in our pain, we felt like we needed to parent them and try to help them, and started sharing those. And that letter that I write every week kind of goes all around the world now in 75 countries and, all over the place. And twice in the 7 years now since we lost Mitch, I've gotten an email that said something to the effect of, today was the day I was going to kill myself, but something you said gave me enough hope to not do that. And so that's a good thing. That wouldn't have happened if I hadn't started writing, and I wouldn't have started writing if I hadn't lost Mitch. So there's one of those quantum things where a promise can be true, even though the thing that it's said about it isn't true. It's not good, but it is good. And
but
that takes time to see that perspective.
It does take time. And that's actually the word I just want to hone in on for a second, that concept of time and space. We have a very small idea of what that means. That's and right. If you look at what God is supposed to mean, our concept of time and space is nothing compared to what God's concept of time and space is. So while we're experiencing that pain in this finite moment to us, all of these other things may be happening at the exact same moment in another part of space or time, or God's space or time.
That's right.
And Chris and I also say, it's very tough to see that, as you said earlier, in that moment. You need to allow yourself the grace to experience what that feeling is, because we are in the human state right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, Lee, let me ask you this. Do you have moments where you dip back into doubt and towards fear? Or yeah.
Absolutely. There's a story in Mark chapter 9, I think. Check that, but it's in Mark, I think chapter 9, where this guy has a son that has epilepsy, and he comes to Jesus and he says, can you help my son? And Jesus says, anything is possible if you believe. And the guy says, I do believe, but help me in my unbelief. And so in the same sentence, he's saying, I believe, but I doubt. And Jesus is okay with that. And so from that, I take great hope from that, because every single day I'm still like, God, why did you let that happen to my son? Or can you even be real if my son can be stabbed in the neck? How can that happen if you love me? And at the same time, I know I don't get to see him again unless God's real and there really is a resurrection and I get to spend eternity with my son. And so that promise, I really want that promise to be true, right? And so when I see other promises fulfilled, like Romans 8:28, and good is coming out of this, and Psalm 34:18, where God is close to the brokenhearted, and you know that, both of you know that. Like there's times when you can't explain it, but you know God is there and he's holding on to you and he's helping you get through that moment. And so, yes, every single day I doubt, and every single day I'm mad, and every single day almost still I shed tears. But also every single day I find something to hope for, to hold on to. And that's how we, Lisa and I have talked about this a million times, like we lost her mom about 2 years ago. And it's just every day something hurts and some grace is given, and you have a memory, or you see a picture, or somebody says, hey, remember that time that mom, or remember that time that Mitch, and it just ministers to you in that moment. And I believe that's God, like just saying, hey, hang in there. There's reason to hope.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to share this story because I just wrote about it. I just published an article on LinkedIn about this today, that, talking about that whole, you see the doubt day, but then you have a good moment. For 20 years, trying to educate blind kids in this country is really hard in regular public schools.
Yeah.
And it was like, I had my change in perception. I gave it over to God. I listened to that "Thy Will Be Done" song constantly. I got this, right? And then all these people keep doubting what my son can do. And then we weren't getting the tool. It was just this uphill battle constantly, right? And then I'd have those almost every day. I'm like, are you kidding me? And go back into fear and doubt. But then I shared today how he, all my hopes and dreams were gone. And one of them was that he would be the valedictorian. And then he ends up, his high school graduation was 2 years ago, and he's the valedictorian, right? And someone sent me a picture, because I was up in the stands, right? Someone sent me a picture, and Michael's standing there with every tool that we fought for, Braille, his white cane, and the school board and the school administration is behind him, that nobody expected him to achieve anything. And he out-achieved 600 kids, and the looks on their faces were like, when I say it's a God moment picture, it is unbelievable. But it was all that time. It's that, that song "Press On." I'm like, yep, there's my life. Press on. We keep pressing on.
Wow.
But
that's the key. Don't you think? I mean, that's the key. In the middle of that struggle, of that doubt and faith struggle, just keep taking one more step towards the faith side. Just one little step, and you can visit, like we say all the time, you can visit the doubt side, but don't live there. Don't live in the doubt side.
That's right.
Yeah. Actually, I just listened to the beginning of one of your episodes. I love your podcast, about the tiny bit of faith.
Yeah.
You did a whole thing on that where, Jesus is yelling at the apostles, what do you have so little faith? And then in the next, thing, he's like, you only need a little bit of faith, like that whole oxymoron thing.
Yep. So what is that concept? What is that concept, a tiny bit of faith? Because I feel like, I feel like we are, if you're church going people, I feel like it is hard sometimes for us to accept that we can be mad, and we can be doubtful, and we can be just yuck, but that one little thing can pull us back. I mean, is that it? That one little bit of faith?
I think it's a perspective issue. I think it's a perspective issue. And the quote that she's referring to, that Kristen's talking about, is, I saw these two scriptures where, one, they're in the boat and they're crossing the lake and Jesus is asleep and this big storm comes up and they're going to sink, right? And the disciples are freaking out and they wake him up and he's like, you have little faith. You're such little faith. And he just tells the storm, quit it, knock it off. And the storm goes away. And so the Savior is bigger than the storm in that moment. But their faith was so little, they didn't remember that the Savior was in the boat with them, right? Mm-hmm. So the storm was bigger than the Savior to them. And the other story is, he says, if you had enough faith, like it was just a tiny little mustard seed of faith, you could throw that mountain over there into the ocean, right? So he's not saying that you have to have this invincible, huge amount of faith. You just have to know that the Savior is bigger than the storm. You just have to know that the promiser is bigger than the problem. Right. So if you get it backwards, if you start thinking that the problem or the situation or the circumstance is bigger than God, mm-hmm. then you don't have enough faith to get through that. Right. So
and I think, it goes back to, but then it goes back to letting go of the thought that God's mind at the same time. That's the part that's hard for me. Like, as I'm sure it was for you with the passing of your son and everything, like you said, how I'm trying to do everything you want me to do down here, and this is still what's happening. Like, come on, are you kidding me?
That's right.
But that, and I think that's where most people have that struggle. I'm trying to be a good person here, God. Why? But we have to keep going back to that. We don't have the mind of God, and that's hard for me.
I think that Jesus said two things that seem contradictory. One is, he said, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And in John chapter 10, he says, the thief, the enemy, Satan, has come to steal and kill and destroy your life, but I have come that you might have an abundant and joyful life. So in the same guy, Jesus, he's telling us life is going to be hard. Your kids are going to be blind, and kids are going to be poor, and they're going to have leprosy, and people are going to die, and you're going to get brain tumors, and your wife's going to leave you, and all the stuff's going to happen because life is hard. But in the same breath, he says, but I have come here that you can have an abundant life here. And so that means that there has to be a way to separate quality of life from the circumstance of life. And I think that's where resilience comes, that idea that no matter what you're going through, you can still be okay, right? You can still write your own destiny, even if you can't see. Ask Scotty Smiley about that, right? I mean, the dude is an Ironman triathlete, and he's climbed Mount Rainier, and he's done all these amazing things. He's a venture capitalist and just an unbelievable guy. Can't see because somebody blew him up in Iraq, right? But he didn't let that circumstance steal his hope, and then therefore didn't let that circumstance dictate his future.
Yeah. Yeah. And how about the title of his book, Hope Unseen?
Hope Unseen. That is amazing
just,
book. Yeah.
That's just, talk about brilliance. When I was, when my divorce nightmare started 3 years ago, the thing that I didn't get that concept. I just hadn't experienced the concept that you just talked about, that you can go through all this and you will have abundance even when someone's ripping your life apart, until by accident, I got invited to this book. A friend of mine years ago invited me to a Bible study at this church I started going to, and I go, I don't do Bible studies. That's like not my thing. She was like, it's actually a book. And I was like, yeah, I don't really do that. And she's like, they have free babysitting. And I go, I'm in. I'm there. Kids are little. So I stayed,
whatever it takes to get you through the door.
So it's a Methodist church, and I grew up Catholic, and it's a long story how we got there. But anyway, all these years later, don't I get invited accidentally? I think I bumped into somebody in the supermarket when all of this had just started, that they were doing Max Lucado's You'll Get Through This. Yeah. And I know that he's a friend of yours. He's like, he the poor guy has carried me through the past 3 years, and he has no idea, right? Because I keep coming. I actually just did our whole last Sunday episode on that study. because of the way that he frames that just what you just said, that you will get through this, and it's not going to be painless. It's not going to be quick, and God will use it for good. And going in it with that perspective, that there is going to be good and abundance at some point, and there's still going to be pain at the same time, was life-changing for me. Like, my hair stopped falling out literally when I started that study for that perspective.
Wow. That's another one of those, it almost gives me a goosebump kind of feeling to think about that. Like, if you think about how God orchestrates the timing of what somebody's writing and how it's going to intersect with somebody else's life. So the week after Mitch died, I got 2 books in the mail. Philip Yancey sent me an advanced copy of his book that was coming out called The Question That Never Goes Away, which was about how do you handle hard things.
Mm-hmm.
And Max sent us a copy. My wife is old friends with Max's wife. That's how we know them. And he used to be our pastor in San Antonio. He sent an advanced copy of You'll Get Through This, which is the Joseph story
Mm-hmm.
of all the hard things that happened to Joseph. And he wrote in the thing, I think this is going to help you. I can't explain the timing of it, but I think it's going to help you. Read it when you're ready, because sometimes it's hard to read things when you're hurting.
Yeah.
But there's a passage in there. He talks about when Joseph's brothers faked his murder and sold him into slavery, and he ended up getting imprisoned and falsely accused of adultery. All these things happened to him, and then he ends up back on his feet, and God delivers him and uses him to save his brothers and the whole nation, right? And what he says is, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. Like, you meant for this thing to harm me, and God used it to help me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it helped you, right? His book helped you. It landed on me at just the right time. And I just feel like that's a God ordained moment. So we were in this terrible situations. Both of us didn't know each other then, but God used Max to minister to us through the story of Joseph, whose brothers were so evil to him. And I think if you're listening to this right now, if you're listening, you're obviously listening right now. COVID-19 is happening to the whole world right now, right? And I believe that this terrible thing we're going through is going to be used for good in a lot of ways. I think we'll come out of it, if we're resilient enough, I think we'll come out of it better off than we went into it, because I think God's going to use it for good.
Yeah.
I think we've seen so many examples of that already.
And at the same time, though, knowing that, yes, he's going to use it for good, but it's going to be a struggle to get there. There's going to be some stuff to get there. And I forget the next line that Max says about don't be naive, and and it doesn't say don't be stupid. That's one of my words. I forget the next part of that, but he's like, don't be an idiot. Like, don't go off the deep end and think you're just going to sit there and it's going to be fine. And then all of a sudden good stuff. But yeah, what a difference going into stuff, knowing. And honestly, I think that is a lot of the reason that my blind sons and a lot of their friends that they know that are blind or have been through a lot of stuff early on, just are more resilient in the way that they know that my kids have challenges every single day, but they don't let that define their day, that they had to they couldn't figure this thing out, or their computer had a glitch. They're always having to pivot and move around and solve problems. Right. So they have a different mindset. Well, except if you're, my middle son is Mitch, and he's quite the middle child. Let me tell you, he's perfect at being a middle child. And if you don't have the right waffles in the freezer, well, then
that's a big deal.
than that,
yeah.
Then his day is ruined.
Yeah. Otherwise,
I kind of wanted to touch on the title of your book, I See the End of You, because as we're talking, I'm at first I read the title of the book and I was like, ooh, like, ee. However, now after talking to you, I can see that I See the End of You can be a very hopeful message as well. Like, it's not just about, I know how this is going to go and you're going to lose your life, but there are other pieces to that. Like, I see the end of you, depending on your response, how this is going to play for you.
That's right. Yeah. So it started with that, looking at that scan where I saw that brain tumor and all the stuff that I knew about glioblastoma, and I've seen the end of you. I know what's going to happen to you. And as it turns out, as I wrote in the book, I do have a 10-year survivor now. Like, every day Eli Powell is alive, I know that I didn't know as much as I thought I did about that disease. And what I figured out, and I think all of us have come to the same conclusion, is that when you're faced with a great challenge in your life, it is equally as great an opportunity for you to find out who God is, find out who you are, find out what your real destiny is, because the thing that's landed in your lap is going to redefine how the rest of your life is going to play out. And you can either let it wreck you, or you can let it sort of resurrect you, if you will.
Oh, I love that. As much as I hate to say it, I think we're going to have to wind up this conversation, although I hope we can have you back, because I think I could go on and on and on listening to you for
I'd
hours.
love to be back. Yeah, it's just
that
great.
would be wonderful. But before we go, I want you to, if you could, Lee, tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find the book, which I know I will be getting very soon, and how they can get hold of you and reach you.
Great. So my website is my name, wleewarrenmd.com. And you can get to my newsletter, which is free every Sunday. It's sort of, I always say you can't change your life until you change your mind. Like, you got to change how you think about the troubles that you're having, or you can't get through it. And so newsletter is a great way to connect. The Dr. Lee Warren podcast, you can get to it from my website or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then my latest book, I've Seen the Interview, is everywhere. Anywhere you can get a book, you can get it. And it's really about hope. It's about the idea that hopelessness is the worst thing you can encounter, and hope is the best thing you can have. And I hope folks will connect. I'd love to hear from them.
Awesome.
Well, I know I signed up already for the newsletter. I can't wait to get my first one. I'm going to be looking for that on Sunday morning.
And I'm the podcast addict. I listen to your podcast. You know what the thing too is, I said to Mary Fran, I'm listening in the mornings because I get up ridiculously early, so I have some peace, especially now that everyone's in my face in quarantine, right? And we are like off the rails here all day, 80 million things going on. And your voice is nice and calm, and your guests, I'd love to just sit and dive in and listen to them. So when you keep seeing it pinging from Philadelphia, that's me. There she is again, listening and re-listening. Good stuff. I'm so happy that you made the time in the midst of, moving across the country and so many things going on, and the book coming out and all that. I so appreciate that you took the time to sit and chat with us. And I know I was thinking of so many people as we're talking that are going to benefit from this. And the majority of them are the rare disease community that I spend a lot of time in, that have a lot of hardship, and trying to navigate the not teetering into doubt and staying in faith. So this is so great. I'm so glad we had the time to do this. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate you both. Thank you so much, Mary and Kristen. God bless y'all for the work that you're doing. And I'd love to come back sometime. Thank you.
We'd love to have you.
And thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. And we will see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.